So I think it's awesome that we're here virtually and really grateful to have the team awesomeness here to share on work planning. And Shirley-Pat, if you're good, I'll hand it over to you. Again, use the chat for questions as you see and witness this amazing presentation and team.
All right. I will actually hand it over, Lara, to our amazing mentee and superstar, Miss Sheena. Sheena, over to you.
Have bananas, everybody. Hello?
Hi, Sheena, we can hear you.
Oh, okay, good. I'm just like, oh my goodness.
Hello.
Okay. Bananas. My name is Sheena Solomon. I am from Klesco and currently working in my community as the Community Wellbeing Coordinator. I am one of 7 mentees learning from these knowledgeable women. It is my sincere honor to introduce to you the Klesco team awesomeness. Violet, who is a seasoned, strong, resilient leader of her community and founder of the team. Her goal for Klesco as a leader is to continue to strive for a healthy and sustainable community that keeps moving forward to create a future for our children and the generations yet to come. Joyce is a resilient, strong leader from her nation and a Tuscotan knowledge keeper, born before her time as the knowledge, language, and songs were handed down orally to her by strong women of her family. She has taken the knowledge handed down to teach or assist in protecting ancestral lands. Shirley-Pat is a mentor and fund developer who was adopted by Klesco, who recognized for her skills and honored her for her commitment to social action and literacy equity as the spark plug for Rotary's International's Right to Read projects in rural Indigenous communities across BC. She is currently working on her doctorate candidate at Edinburgh University Centre for Canadian Studies. In terms of an Indigenous medicine wheel learning model from the East, these women bring to our world illumination and truth as they have created spaces and places for others to learn, practice language and culture, and plan for our children and the generations yet to come. From the South, they bring love, trust, growth, a committed to lifelong learning and sharing of their gifts, awakening the culture within while decolonizing practices and processes. From the West, these women bring strength, experience, and introspection, dedication to community planning initiatives, mentorship, and innovation in learning and healing. From the North, they bring cleansing, renewal, and resilience, the coordination of community development and delivery of social action programs grounded in cultural teachings. And in the center, Joyce, Violet, and Shirley-Pat bring connection and wisdom, the sharing of their lived experiences, a joyful way of being and walking and talking the cultural protocols and practices. Please join me in welcoming Violet, Joyce, and Shirley-Pat to share their CPP journey and Tuscotan seasonal round planning process.
All right, so let's all give Ms. Sheena a super round of applause. And so if you know how to do it on your reactions there, you got a little hand clap. So one of the things that this amazing team does, and it started with me, is they mentor other women in particular. And in the journey, the almost 10-year journey that Violet, Joyce, and myself have been on, we've had the opportunity to mentor many, many young Chilcotans. And I'm so honored by all the things that Sheena has brought to our team, all the skills she has brought, and all of the joy and fun and laughter, because the work that we do as community planners is difficult. And one of the things that this team does very well is use humor as a healing mechanism. It also keeps us going. And we're known when we're in the office, you can hear us, right, Joyce? Down the hallway, they always know when Team Awesomeness is in the building, because all you typically hear is laughter and giggles. So today, what I'd like to do, just because we're not in person, is if you would be so kind, as Lara is going to watch the chat with Stephanie for us, if you could tell us where you're from, and maybe tell us your favorite season and maybe your favorite seasonal activity. And then later on in the presentation, I'll ask Laura to maybe ask a few of you to share that with us if time permits. But if you could share that in the chat, because that'll help us later on, and it'll get us a chance to get to know each other and what our favorite seasons are. And it relates to how this team shifted through its CCP journey and began to utilize and adopt different ways of knowing and doing and incorporating a Chilcotin process and practice around a traditional way of planning. And because I am an educator by trade and a grant writer and a fund developer, I always like to let my adult learners who are co-producing knowledge with us, that these are some of the key things that we hope to accomplish today. So we're hopeful that this will be a little bit of a practical tool, or might be a spark for you to think about how you can involve the traditional processes and practices that your communities have been doing since time immemorial into this very sort of daunting CCP process, and really to make it your own and make it so much more meaningful for your communities. We want to highlight how all these things, just as the previous speaker in the plenary spoke, are interconnected with each other, and how when you do this, if you think about it in small chunks, that you can be collecting the evidence as you're going, that will make the reporting and the telling of the CCP story that much easier. And we're going to provide a little example. So I'd like to ask our amazing knowledge keeper and fluent language speaker, Miss Joyce, to talk to you a little bit about the journey, and maybe then, if she'd be so kind, to share in the language our community's vision. Joyce, you're muted at the moment. If you kindly unmute yourself. There she goes. And thank you for that beautiful welcoming. It's always so lovely to start in a good way with you.
The channel, yeah. One of the things that we've started, and I know people always say that some of us are born before or after or before our time, to be a change for the people of our nation or First Nations across Canada and into the world. And it took me these two ladies to realize where my expertise lied. As many of us, we need people to guide us. And I had been in politics for many years until I met these two ladies and realized that this is where I needed to be, was to guide other First Nations to who they can really be. And my language is first and foremost. I'm a residential school survivor, but I never lost my language because I had the grounding of women in my family that were strong. And so our vision was written by Glasgow and the community, and it's always been an honor. It took us 5 years to complete, but it all came from the community. So it's something that I have issues around. Whoop, I'm not sure what happened there. I have just been, I lost the PowerPoint. I'm not sure where I'm supposed to go on this.
I think Shirley-Pat, were you sharing your screen? Maybe.
I think Shirley-Pat was. Did we lose Shirley-Pat?
Did we lose Shirley-Pat? Let me look.
I think we lost her.
I can share my copy if you guys want.
Sure, and while you're sharing that, does anyone want to share where they're from and their favorite season? Maybe we could just, as we're getting the PowerPoint up, if anyone wants to share.
That would be awesome.
So we have, let's see, I'm gonna look, we have, oh, Shirley's back. We have Donna is joining us from Okanagan Nation. She loves spring, new life, being out on the land with family, harvesting plants for medicines. So Donna's so great to share. We're back up here.
Oh, thank you.
Perfect.
I apologize. I don't know what happened, but everything just kicked me out. So thank you for carrying on and for jumping in with tech support. I really appreciate that.
No problem.
Your question, but we'll pass it back over to Joyce to carry on.
Okay, thank you. Like I had said, I'm a fluent speaker, and when you're a fluent speaker, writing in our language can be pretty tough. And so one of the things that I do is translate in my head, not necessarily what's written on, because our writing is a little different than being a fluent speaker. So bear with me. Tlaskotani nohanan tlasenia kahileta nohanani gode tai gucha nohanan ha ka do hotel go kaji deni tatli nohanani tlasko within bal deni sit going sit kot in yuncha Ian nohanan gwajal tan hogult Egypt sungala sa iyan nila sa hogult Egypt no sa kaya in jugalain gucho hogult Egypt deni tatli agon nagurin di nohanan ko taigulin sa chana siya.
So Chanel, yeah, Joyce, thank you so very much. I love when Joyce speaks, and it speaks to the challenge we have also of language revitalization, which is so key to the work we do in communities, and speaks to the difference between orality and the written word and how sometimes they don't always match. But it also speaks to the fact that there are experts in your nation that can help you, right, Joyce? We had William help us with this because he's become an expert at being the bridge and being able to translate it. So if I could please ask our leader, our fearless leader, Miss Violet, I'm going to go back one if you could please in the slides and ask Violet to read the English translation for us, because it's also powerful to acknowledge that many of us are silent speakers and we live our world bridge between two and utilize the English language. Violet, if you'd be so kind.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Joyce and Shirley-Pat. Okay, the English version is: the people of Glasgow will ensure that the environment is not ruined while using the land as a money-making business.
Hi.
It will be within how they live their lives as
No,
a
it's all right. I just muted. I'm on a webinar at the moment.
Oh, can you hear me?
I'm not.
Yeah, we can hear you. Someone's talking
Oh.
on. I think Laura's just going to mute whoever that is. Thanks, Laura. Or, all right, keep going by.
Oh, okay. It will be within how they live their lives as a people and within their neighbors. And what comes out of Glasgow land will be protected. What we have built will be there for our children and their children that are not born yet. With it, we will have a better business for ourselves, and by that, we will be stronger.
And then we were setting these things, and in the process of doing community planning, as all of you know, sometimes the world is bigger than just our community, it's also our nation. So whoever's controlling the slide, next please. And in 2004, one of the most amazing things happened. After a 30-year battle, the Tsilhqot'in were the first ever Indigenous community to have their rights and title ratified by an external colonial Supreme Court of Canada, and it shifted everything. Joyce, could you go back one more? Joyce, could you speak just a little bit about what title has meant since 2004 and how it shaped and changed our second iteration of our CCP? So for those on the call, as Joyce unmutes herself, we did a full CCP. We followed and used all of the amazing resources that were provided by our support team at the federal government. And we came up with a really good plan that we implemented and started to do amazing things, which I'll ask Violet to talk about before. But we had a chance to revise it, and it happened after title. So what did title do, and how did it shift things for us, Joyce?
Title had allowed us to really seriously take a look at how we did our normal businesses within our communities. And one of them being that we have so much unwritten, unspoken laws within our territory. And I remember starting off the first CCP, being hired on and looking at the template as being a cookie cutter template. And I just couldn't wrap my head around it. When you're First Nations, born First Nations, speak your language, sometimes the laws of Canada and the laws of BC don't reflect where we live. And so when the elders spoke to the title, they wanted everything protected, but they also wanted our children to live comfortably and be part of the world change. And so I have a mother who was one of the main witnesses within the Honeygut court case that allowed for the title to be won. There was quite a few elders that stuck to their guns and said, this is the way we live, this is the way we did things. And so it changed everything. So it meant we can go back, we can go out on the land, and we can, when you take an elder out of the home, out of the community, out onto the land where they're the most comfortable, that's when things start to their memories come back as to how they did things. And to accommodate that, we tie in. We're not saying that, you know, our way is the best way, but for our nation it is. And so the title changed a lot of things in the way we did things within our territory. And that meant industries coming in to writing down what our governing system was, to changing some of the policies that are in negotiations right now. So that's where we come in with the title case. And I was very fortunate to be one of the translators when all of these affidavits were coming in. And so I knew where the elders were coming from. And so sometimes we forget, learning through the schooling system, sometimes we forget that we have to take time for our elders and we have to allow them to absorb things before we come back. And so that's what we've done. That's how we change things with this whole title case.
Exactly. Oh, so channel, yeah, Joyce. And I couldn't have said it better, because what it did is it didn't bring back, but it awakened, as you said, those unwritten and unspoken laws that were silenced for so long because of colonialism, and allowed us to do what we needed to do. I was going to call on Violet next, but it looks like she had to step out. What Joyce is referring to is actually a result of the first iteration of our CCP in combination with the title case. As a result of the first CCP, we were able to secure funding through the National Indigenous Brotherhood Trust, which is funding that was for survivors of residential school, in order to do an on the land in community language course that wasn't based on the university courses, that wasn't based on this foreign writing system that was created by an amazing linguist, but not of the land and of the people. And instead had people like Joyce, knowledge keepers like Joyce, take community members and elders out on the land to do the language, but also to do traditional use studies. So to look at how are we recording these and translating them into evidence that's being utilized for our settler partners or our settler funders. So mapping and recordings and pieces like that. Violet, as in your role as a leader, in particular, not just as a counselor for more than a decade, but also for the last 5 years as the chief's assistant, can you tell me what title has meant for you and for the work that we do?
Well, title, that's a big one, and it has been for such a long time. And like Chief Francis always said, we are the river people, and title runs right through our territory. And with having this, it gives us, I guess you would say, a little more ground to stand on, and more resiliency to move forward.
Perfect. And what was it like to be, because were you in Ottawa that day when Chief and the rest were on the floor of the House of Commons? Were you with them in Ottawa that day?
No, I wasn't. I wish I was. I heard it was pretty powerful.
It was. I remember standing in my living room and listening for the first time an Indigenous person drum, young Payal Lasis, Francis is our chief's son, drum, who was the first person to drum on the floor, which required one of the only unprecedented time where every elected official, regardless of party lines, signed off on that because they had to in order to do something that was outside of the precedents. Sheena, I'm going to call on you for just a second. I know you said you don't, oh, she doesn't really have any soda. You're so cute. We're texting on the side. But Sheena, what I want to ask you is, what was it like to do that first NIB language program? What was it like to first work with us? What was your first impression of being our mentee? Just a couple of words.
Hello.
Sometimes that's the role of the mentor, my darling, is to push you into being uncomfortable so that you learn. So tell me a few things.
Well, I was quite honestly out of my element during the whole NIB process and learning. But it got me more into wanting to learn our culture and traditions and our language. And it was like really great, like the Joyce's like passion and enthusiasm for teaching was like, oh my God, I need to be in here. I need to do this. I need to learn. And then so I got thrown right into the middle of it. And it was a great learning experience. It honed my, I guess it would be my planning skills. And I just, was right in there. Like I not only planned and organized, I also participated, and it was amazing.
And I'm going to say it's been such a joy to witness your journey. And sometimes one of the biggest joys in this work that we do is when we get to see in someone else maybe what they don't see and foster the skills and capacity and abilities that we knew you had. So next slide, please. And thank you, Sheena, for sharing. And thank you for allowing me to push you outside of your comfort zone. And laugh, see, and the joy of it. And she still laughs with me. She might, we'll see what happens offline. No, just kidding. And then we had the pleasure of sharing our story with this crew 2 years ago. And what we didn't realize was there was this amazing graphic artist behind us doing this beautiful thing. Joyce sang, we shared our vision, and then this beautiful crew of support through the CCP team invited Joyce and I to come back again. So next slide, please. So as Joyce kind of talked a little bit about, we went from a cookie cutter kind of model, which is a great place to start when you're learning to do community development. And it is a good model, but we needed to be, as Joyce said, more culturally responsive and to go back to our elders' teaching and to give ourselves permission to take the time. Because in my PhD, what the Tsilhqot'in people have taught me is we are the land, but also, as Violet stated, water is life. And those two key components, as well as the children and generations yet to come, need to be in the forefront of our mind in all of that we plan and all of our processes and practices. Joyce, can you talk a little bit more about the trust and sort of what that consistent leadership allowed us to do? And then I'm going to ask Violet about what the mentorship and the ability to implement has meant.
Yeah, one of the things that we have, because we've had so many, I guess we have in First Nations communities, you always have somebody doing a study or asking, sending out questionnaires to, people get tired of that. And so we get faced with, no, I'm not willing to do that today, or I've been asked these questions before. And so one of the things that I was taught by my grandmother and my grandmothers was that you always have to build that trust with people in order for them to share their life experience with you or what their dreams and plans are. And so one of the things that we've done is have just information sharing in the community and out of the community. And one of the bigger things that we realized was, let's take the colonized words out of our presentation, meaning taking off reserve and on reserve. Let's take that label away. And so we started saying, oh, we're going to be out of the community. We'll be having a meeting in Williams Lake, or we're going to be out on the land, you know. And so and the trust started to build with people. And so it was actually, Sheena will tell you, I don't know how many times we've had to leave the community just to do some of our reports, because we always had 5 or 6 people in our office. In our tiny little office, we always had people in there. And so asking questions, and it's not just about doing the job as a community comprehensive planning coordinator. It was getting to know the community and people coming in wanting to renew their firearms certificate. Those are the trust that you have to build. And you cannot, we don't stick to just our job description. It's wherever you're needed. And so when people start to see that you can actually do things outside of what you're supposed to do, they'll start talking to you, whether it's giving them a ride back into Williams Lake or looking for things online. And it was amazing. It was just, I had such a, it's fun. You got to make it fun for the people. And
I still remember the time in the van with you, Joyce, when we got out and some of our most quiet elders, so quiet. And then they got so far onto the land, right outside of the square buildings. And all you hear in the back of the van is giggle, 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 and then something in Chilcotin, and then giggle, 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 and something in Chilcotin. And I think we learned more in the back of the van than we did in many other places.
It does. And you learn to not carry a notepad, because sometimes that could be intimidating to our members and community members, and because they've been judged so long that they don't know what you're writing, they're not going to trust you. And so I've learned to store things. And like Shirley-Pat said, the best conversations that I ever listened to was when we were traveling somewhere and you hear there's silence for probably the first 10 minutes of our travel. And then all of a sudden you start to hear back there, you know, they're talking to each other about certain areas of the land and remembering things. And so those are some of the things that I loved. And that's where the trust came in, and reminding myself that we are not just from each of these communities, Chilcotin community, we're all Chilcotin. Mm-hmm. We all have ties to whatever it is that's going on. So that was where the trust came in, and I still get calls. And so
you still get calls. You do. Yeah. And I think it speaks to exactly what you're talking about, is that don't forget that there are others in your nation. They might not be in your community, but there are skills in your nation, and that you might be able to mentor or utilize those skilled individuals in your own nation. Yes. And it speaks to, Joyce, also how I think we were able to use the grants and the funds we developed from the first CCP to do the second one, because it was the funding from NIB Trust, from First Peoples, from other places and spaces that enabled us to go out on the land, to do these more culturally responsive and fun engagement sessions where we took it outside. And I also want to give a shout out to the CCP organizers. If you had a chance to do the graphic workshop, they took me out of my comfort zone, Sheena. I wasn't allowed to talk for 2 hours, and I had to learn how to draw more than a stick figure. Graphic ways are also a great way to record, because the community could see visually instead of the words. It's more of a visual. Thank you so much, Joyce. And it also speaks, I think, about living title, right? I love when you would say that to us. We're going out on the land. We are living title. And that getting out on the land in unceded territories is living your title, whether it's been ratified by a colonial Supreme Court or not. I'm so grateful for all that you've taught all of us. And on that note, I think I'd like to hear a little bit from Violet around how the second CCP has led us to a community wellness program, not just for Klesco, but for all the communities across the Chilcotin Nation that was guaranteed funding for multiple years, that has enabled herself and Sheena and others to remain employed beyond the CCP process. So Violet, could you talk to us a little bit about how implementing culture and using these seasonal rounds is so important in this community wellness work that you and Sheena are doing now?
Okay. Well, this past year, there was a team of us. We were doing the prevention and the family support, the community wellness, which we had 6 team members working with us, and how we would tie the culture into the wellness programs for the families. This helped us maintain our independence and to build the resiliency of the community. And with mentoring Sheena in the past year and how she's brought so much to the table, so much new ideas, and where we were able to connect with the younger generation also, which is a big, it's important. Yeah, and that was a huge step. With implementing the CCP, it, I guess it brought us under the direction of the members, we were able to revamp and in accordance with our Chilcotin protocols in the process. We utilized the seasonal rounds with the help of Joyce and Shirley-Pat, which I'm thankful for Joyce. I'm not sure what else to add.
I think you've hit it. Is what it does is it enables, the CCP isn't a one-time thing. What you're sharing highlights, Violet, is it's a process, right? And we learn within that process, and as a result, we get better and the work gets better. And most importantly, the community gets healthier and more resilient. And so I was so also happy to hear the First Nations Health Authority talk about how you can integrate different plans, because as Joyce said, our communities sometimes have been over-researched and over-planned, and what they're missing is the work plan to put it in place. So that implementing, right? Taking a mentor, taking a project and integrating, and this is what having consistent leadership and a leader on your team brings you. I can't stress this enough. If you can have one of your elected leaders or one of your traditional leaders or both on your CCP team, it will make your process more meaningful and more grounded in what needs to be done in the community. And it links it together with all of those other pieces and make sure that you're not, you know, what can happen in planning, doing silo planning instead of the more complex but beneficial and rich integrated planning. Joyce, can you talk a little bit about how the wildfires kind of threw us for a bit, and then how we don't wait when opportunities present, even if we're in the middle of one phase, we jump into a next phase if an opportunity presents. And we'll talk a little bit about governance and food security before we move on.
Yes, in 2017, we had a wildfire that devastated our communities right across the Chilcotin, and there was an approval for the CCP to be completed. But because of that, we had to be put on hold because most of our communities were evacuated, and that, with that being said, many of our community members ended up in different cities, and so we had to put that on hold. But as we went, we started the CCP. It was actually kind of funny because I had done the first phase and I had been on the fire all summer. Something out of my elements because I was on as a medic through the whole summer. being on the fire and seeing the devastation that was out there, but also being reminded that sometimes things happen for a reason. And as Chief Francis said, when we are not allowed to practice our traditional way of doing things to preserve the land, this is what happens. And so we took that, and when we took the elders out, you could see some of the things coming back after the fire. I'm sure it was devastating for people that have lost homes, but we started to see plants that were never there before for many years. And so the elders said, this is what happens when fire occurs. And so you take what is given to you, as elders continue to tell us. You accept what is given to you. And so it wasn't just the devastation, it was also a blessing to see what was coming back, to see the elders say, this is what has happened, and we need to learn to live with it. And so those are some of the things that we've learned to accept. As
and I think it put us
say, oh my goodness, you know, we're being tested again, we're being tested again, you know. And so this is something that I've learned to have patience, because as many know, I've stepped out of my comfort zone. So it's something that I was able to say, okay, let's move forward. And Violet getting a hold of me and saying, we need to complete the CCP, you know. and I'm thinking, oh my word, I was just on a fire all summer. And how am I gonna bring my mind back to something that the community wants and needs are? And so I accepted. And then when I accepted, I'm thinking, oh my goodness, what the heck did I just do that?
Well, we're so glad you accepted, because what it did is it brought all those lessons to the second CCP.
Yes, and so I'm honored.
No,
and
wait.
It's been an honor to work with these women. And talking about Sheena, sorry, Sheena, I'm going to do this to you. Sheena was a youth worker that came on, and as a team, we watched her that summer. And so when we talk about mentorship, we encouraged her to apply for the job as wellness coordinator. I remember the first time she came on, she's like, I don't know what I'm doing, you know.
Joyce, I think we voluntold.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, we took a page out of my mother's book, and we may or may not have voluntold her. Yeah.
And so to watch someone,
the best decision I was told to do yet.
and to watch Sheena blossom to who she is today is just amazing. For the younger generation, we need to start encouraging, because I continue to tell the younger generation, we're not going to be here forever. We need you guys to step up and start taking some of this lead on. And so, Sheena, you're doing an awesome job. And it's something like this that takes, you know, watching who she is and how she is with people. And so that's where we're at right now.
And what a beautiful gift that this process has given us, right, Joyce? It gave us a space and a place to mentor not just Sheena, but so many people, and watching them blossom and bloom is what it's about. And I can't agree more. Sheena brings to us a fresh voice and a fresh piece. Could you do the next slide for me now? I'm just conscious of time, but I always get so excited when Joyce shares. It's hard for me not to just turn into listening mode, have my two big ears on. But what's also important in this process, and I just want to give a final example before our time is up, is to look at it from an Indigenous way of knowing and doing, whatever that Indigenous way of knowing and doing is for your community and for your nation. Sean Wilson talks about how, just as Joyce started us off today, that we are
I'm not sure what happened to Shirley-Pat there.
in ceremony and research and planning. I paused. I turned my video off. It's the damn hotel Wi-Fi. Can you do the next slide for me? So in in the Tsilhqot'in ways of knowing and doing, everything was done in accordance to a seasonal round, as in many other communities, right? Every activity, every process, every practice has its own season. And as a planner, this is awesome because what it does is it gives you a 4-month block, a bite-sized block to think about what you get done, right, Joyce?
Yes.
And I think here we've got some, oh, in Nunavut, my favorite activity is tubing in the winter. I could see why, And we have some berry picking and some other of our favorite seasonal activities. And what we try and do is went to the community to find out what they did in each season, and then tried to figure out how could we integrate those processes and practices into our planning. Could I have the next slide, please? And as I said, these are 3 to 4 month planning, and they're in accordance with protocols and ceremony. And Joyce was our guide. And it simplified what we were doing because it also, as Joyce said, forced us every 3 months, usually outside of the community, so we had no distractions, to get together and to reflect on what we did and what we're going to do in the next seasonal round. Next slide, please. I'm going to share this slide because it gives you just a basic breakout of what Joyce was talking about. And typically funding usually comes in the fall. We write it in the winter, but by the time they make the decision and roll out your contract, it's fall. So we usually take the fall to do the planning and the hiring and all of those contractual deliverable things. And then to start setting the plan for winter and spring. In winter is when we tell stories. So we use that time for one-on-one visits and to complete our interim reporting. Spring starts with so many activities in the Tsilhqot'in that's when Joyce got everybody out on the land, sharing and talking, and the data collection was so rich. And like Joyce said, is find ways that your elders and your community members are comfortable being recorded. It might not be a notepad, it might be a video recorder, or you might sit down later and have a debrief with your team and write your notes and memories. And then summer, because that's when the nation's gathering are, that's when we always present back to the community and have them have the opportunity to celebrate and share and revise our work. Next slide, please. So, Laura, I just wanted to open it up to Joyce to give some final thoughts. And then if there are any questions or anyone who'd like to jump in our last 8 minutes, because I think it's important that we also hear from other people.
And we actually have a few more minutes. We have until 35 minutes after the hour.
We got extra. Okay, I'll turn it over then to Joyce, maybe just for some final thought.
So Channel Ya, Shirley-Pat. One of the things that we had that I'm continuously reminded of is in, I believe it was 2018 when our Tsilhqot'in warriors were finally exonerated, is when I think the healing started for our nation. And by saying that, I watched the reaction of people. I'm a people watcher. And so when that exoneration happened for our 6 warriors, there was a lot of talk about now we can move forward. Now we can finally be at peace with some of the things that has happened. And so that to me, I think was a step forward to finally accepting what has happened to our nation, to finally accept that our warriors were just protecting the women and children, and to hear some of our elders, some of my families, there was real tears into that acceptance. And to watch one of my uncles that I've never ever seen break down to say, now we can actually forgive and move forward. This is when everything kind of fell into place for myself when we were working with Lascaux community, is to hear them talk about things that they were never able to talk about. So when hurts have been recognized, I think is when our nation starts to actually fully start to heal as First Nations people. I always think that I'm not, how how would you put it? I'm not doing the best that I can. But when you start to hear people say, no, you have to do this, no, you have to do that, is when I realize, wow, how proud we are as First Nations people, and being reminded by an elder to say all First Nations people are referred to as Ninkaini, meaning the people of the land. It doesn't matter what nation you are from, you are still the people of the land. And so I get reminded of that every now and then, to say, when you're recognizing other First Nations people coming into your territory, they're Ninkaini, they're the people of the land. So it's just been an honor to be on this journey with wonderful women that not only we pick each other up when one of us fell, but to also encourage and to have that encouragement from other people from across BC to other people from across Canada. So with that, Sichana, Violet, and Shirley-Pat and Sheena for being that foundation for the communities. And that is one of the biggest goals I think that I've ever accomplished in my life. Not, you know, and doing so many things, this was one of the most meaningful plan that has ever been put in place for any First Nations to either to be encouraged to follow is always listen to your community members, always listen to where they're at, and that in itself will start the goals to go forward. Sichanalya.
Oh, Sichanalya, Joyce. And just to sort of add on to that, this journey has been an honor for me to take part of, especially as a Mido, as a privileged white settler woman. And I'm so grateful for all the gifts of learning and knowledge, and for all the co-production that I've done with these amazing women. It's led me to my PhD, which I just submitted my first full draft, yay! And in sort of alignment with what Joyce has taught me and what she said, the 6 chiefs were leaders of a nation. They acted in accordance with their laws and traditions, and they were well regarded as heroes of their people. The events of the Chilcotin War and those after show how the historical conditions continue to influence and impact current interactions between settlers, settler governments, and the Chilcotin Nation. The parallel process, however, of cultural awakening and resurgence that we spoke about, including the seasonal round planning process and practices that we use, can also be seen in the formation of the Chilcotin Women's Council, of whom Joyce is a member, in 2019, and the governance work being done by our very own Shawnee Palmentier of Glasgow, who is a certified lawyer. And the work being done across the nation, where traditional laws are being recorded and written down, modernized and ratified into laws like the Chilcotin Nation's Dens in the Chen, emergency moose protection, the wildlife law, as well as the river law, are prime examples of this, as well as the localized language revitalization and on the land learnings that are happening through negotiated secured funding, skills training in residential carpentry, and rebuilding the abilities and capacities for the nation to address the ongoing impacts of continued settler colonialism and the intergenerational trauma related to the colonial logics. The Chilcotin Nation has been acknowledged as making a significant strive to address the issues of poverty, violence, mental health, and addictions in the face of ongoing challenges of this continued settler colonialism environment. And I hold my hands up high to these women here, as well as all of those here doing the work in communities across Turtle Island. Keep decolonizing, keep making things uncomfortable, and keep getting out on the land and doing things in accordance with your cultures, protocols, and practices. Sichanila Gulim. Violet, are there any final words that you would like to say, unless we have any questions from anyone, Lara?
I just want to say thank you to you all, and how important it is to be part of the mentorship program. I've helped mentor Plus, I was mentored by Shirley-Pat and by Joyce, and I'm very thankful for that. And I'm thankful that we're moving forward, implementing our CCP phase 3 and doing it through our seasonal rounds. So I'd like to thank you for that.
Thank you, my beautiful sister. And just so you know, we all refer to each other as sisters because we're all sisters, but we're also stars in our own way. So feel free to use that one. And Team Awesomeness came because of my only way I could describe Violet and all of the many hats and things she does in her community, because like many women leaders, she does it all. And like Joyce said, when people find out you can do it all, they will knock on your door. Laura, do we have any questions?
Yeah, any questions from anyone? I don't see any in the comments, but I'm going to open up some space for any questions anyone may have.
Nice. Is that BIC? Is that a sket in the background? A beautiful sket in the background.
Great presentation, ladies. It's great to hear your story. And my first visit to the community, I was very excited and, to be welcomed in the community by the Joyce and Violet, and getting to know the community and participating there. And you have a beautiful community. I was recollecting back to when the Chalcotin case was announced. I was very excited to hear about it. And I looked around and nobody else was reacting or anything. I don't know if everybody fully understood the aspect of it. And I was just so excited when the Chalcotin case was announced and hearing that on the news. So proud of the Chalcotin Nation and the communities, and love to hear your stories. Missed hearing your prayer song, Joyce. I know you got beautiful singing and songs to share as well. And congratulations on incorporating CC Plan and getting out on the land. That's great.
And if anyone has a chance to visit Bee's beautiful community, please, please do. I've had the honor and great fortune to work with Esket as well. And there are lots of kinships and relationships across the river between Esket and Claskal, in particular, following the Chilcotin War and the smallpox epidemic, where the communities actually came together. The small percentage of survivors came together to ensure that both communities thrived and survived, and show the great resilience that they have today. Thank you, Bee, for sharing. Anybody else on the call? I'm just seeing if I could recognize anybody else's name that I could popcorn and be a bad teacher. Well, if there isn't any questions, you can always reach us. We're pretty easy to find. I'll do my best to remember to check Slack. It's another new platform that I've had the opportunity to learn with these ladies. And as I always say to my sisters, just keep being awesome. Lead from your heart, because when you lead from your heart, you tie yourself to your land, and your land is what gives you life and gives you purpose and is who we are. Sichanel Gulin.
Thanks, Shirley-Pat. And we want to thank Sheena, who was just so wonderful. It's so great to hear your story and your journey as a mentee with this wonderful team, as well as Violet, Joyce, and Shirley-Pat. Work planning, it can be, seen as just a template that we fill in, but you've shared that it's so much more, that it's yours and your communities. And just with the different considerations you've had in implementing your work plan, engaging youth, engaging elders, it's just so amazing to hear. And we appreciate you coming and sharing with us. The presentation slide will be on Slack as well. It'll be on the Comprehensive Community Planning website. And if you have any questions that come up, you can post it on the community stories on Slack, or get in touch with us, and you can get in touch with Team Awesomeness. So again, raise my hands to you all for being here with us today. Thank you.
Shout out to Stephanie and Laura as well. I just want to say I've worked with a lot of bureaucrats, and hands down, Laura's my favorite, because she's like the least bureaucratic of bureaucrats ever. And if I could like clone her, I would. I'm just gonna give that shout out to her. Thank you for all your support and for your awesomeness, because we may need to get her a vest. I'm just saying.